long and interesting couple of days already. You've seen a lot of me. You may or may not be happy to know that this is the last you're going to see of me. I'm handing over to some incredibly capable brains after this, and I'll be sitting and listening along with the rest of you. But before I step off the stage, I wanted to try and summarise some of what I've seen and heard over the last few days. I set myself the challenge of coming up with 3 points and 3 points only, and I immediately began to cheat by adding in little sub-points and diversions to cram in more than 3. I did take some photos from the amazing graphics board that we have, and I'll just see if I can get them up on screen. Oh, yep, here we go. I zoomed in on the visual representation of my 3 things, and the first one is unlocking our low emissions advantage. Now, to me, this means actually adopting the technology that we already have and being aware that our competitors are moving fast to give our customers and our potential future customers what they want. Now, some of these tools are new technology, but some of them aren't, and I love that it was the futurist that we heard from, out of everyone we've heard from over the last couple of days, that talked about destocking as a strategic advantage for increasing revenue. The second thing that really stood out to me, and I'm going to see if I can get us onto, oh, there we go. The second thing, and you can see the flags here, is that we're not alone. We're not an outlier. We're not even actually leading in some of these things, although we are leading in some of the others. China, Australia, Denmark, and the US are moving ahead at tackling their agricultural emissions. They are really thinking about it in their own markets. And although this is a challenge for us as an exporter and a competitor, it's also what we want as parents, grandchildren, people with grandchildren, people with friends and families. We want this to be a race to the top rather than a race to the bottom, because if we have to compete to be the cleanest and the greenest, that means there is competition to be that person in the race, and ultimately that is better for all of us, to have a livable climate in which to continue to farm and continue to grow food. Which brings me to the third thing that stood out for me, which is this thing here, which is we are still going too slowly to adopt this broad portfolio of tools, many of which we have at our fingertips right now, many of which you've just heard are either being rolled out or about to be rolled out, and there is going to be a choice. We've got a farming community that the majority is ready to try things and to adapt, which is something we need to do, not just to sell our products, but to keep growing them in this rapidly changing environment. And I mean environment in the absolute broadest sense of the word. A lot is changing, and it's not just the climate. So to me, that leaves me feeling like we have a giant challenge ahead of us, as we have had for some time, but also like we're ready to meet it. It's the doing part that just needs to get a wee bit faster. So I have absolutely loved hearing from all of you, and oh gosh, I had so many things on my list that I'm losing track of time. Oh no. It kind of, I guess, leaves me with a feeling that if I were to come back in 1-2 years and hear all of those presentations again, we'd be seeing a lot more concrete reductions. There'll be a lot more than 3,000 cars off the road, and that makes me feel really hopeful as I head off. Now, I'm going to hand over to the excellent Scott Champion. He's the CEO of FAR, and he has got a fascinating group of panellists, which he's going to introduce to you, as well as a video montage. Ka kite.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As has just been said, my name's Scott Champion. It's a privilege to take us through this last session today. So we've got a panel with 7 people from across the sector, backgrounds in farming, agribusiness, government, mighty agribusiness, industry good organisations. and we've got a series of questions we're going to be asking them. We will have opportunity to take questions from the floor as well, but I suspect, given the size of our panel, we might be a little bit pressed for time. And we're also going to slot in a poll as well to give you an opportunity to have your say and to think about some priorities. So I'm going to stop there and we're going to play a little montage just to take us back into some of the context that we had earlier across the 2 days.
For generations, New Zealand farmers have focused on getting the best from what we have, building pasture-based systems that are efficient, resilient, and grounded in our natural advantage. We have innovated, changed the way we farm, and increased production, but at the same time preserved efficiency and kept emissions per kilo of food among the lowest in the world. That is not just a point of difference, it is a competitive advantage. And now the world is starting to value exactly that. Markets, capital, and customers are shifting toward how food is produced, not just how much. The opportunity in front of us is not to change who we are, but to lead with it, to prove it, back it, and turn that advantage into enduring value. Because the opportunity in front of us is clear: to lead with what we already do well, to build systems that stand up to scrutiny, to build resilience for you and your future, and to turn low emissions into high value. The question isn't whether the world is changing, it's whether we choose to lead it.
So hopefully, along with Eloise's comments a moment ago, that gives you a bit of context, also for our panellists, a bit of context from the last couple of days. And I guess this final session is very much about wrapping up our learnings from the last and our thoughts from the last couple of days. And we are going to challenge you, encourage you probably is a better word, to think about what could my role in change be. So we're going to be focusing particularly on that theme of what are the elements of New Zealand's low emission advantage, and ultimately how do we unlock it to create a stronger, more profitable and resilient primary sector. So they're the things we're going to be thinking about through this last session of day 2. What I want to do now is take an opportunity to introduce our panellists here to my right-hand side. So as I said, it's quite a large panel. We've got 7. We've got questions that I'm going to be asking the panellists, and we're going to ask as many of our panellists as we possibly can each of those questions, but possibly not every question to everyone. So I've sort of allocated them out, and if we've got some time at the end, we're going to open it up to opportunities for questions from the floor as well. So what I'd like to do is just start, I think we might go from left to right. Tracy, we'll start with you, but if you could just sort of briefly introduce yourself, and also if you think about the last 2 days, but also your roles in the industry, tell us about your why for reducing emissions and how you see New Zealand's low emissions advantage. So a little intro and then the why question, and we'll just move left to right. And panellists, there are microphones. Looks like you've found them there on the sofas, but we'll just get you to use those as we move through. So Tracy, I'll start with you.
Oh, tēnā koutou katoa, everybody. Thank you, Scott. So my why has always been about making a difference or making things better for the people that I represent. So the first part in this emissions piece is I want to be a good tipuna, a good ancestor. I've got children that are deeply concerned about, changing weather and climate and all of that. So that's the first part of it on a personal level. As a governor or a leader of an organisation, you kind of carry that baton or that mantle for the period of time you represent it. So I want to do a good job in terms of how Dairy NZ supports farmers. And then the third part is our low emissions advantage could really quickly become our Achilles heel in New Zealand in terms of the pasture-based system, and some of the mitigations and things that are available for people overseas are not so available for us. So I just want to maintain our global competitiveness and help our farmers continue to be successful.
Great, Tracy, thank you. Charles, let's move on to you and start with who you are and where you're from.
Tēnā tātou. Ko Charles Taituha tōku ingoa, no mani o poto ahau. So I wear a number of different hats, at home, I just drive the kids around, and on a daily basis, I get sort of told what to do by most of my team. And but one of my sort of key roles, I suppose, that I sort of hold dear to me is a governor on a number of whenua Māori blocks, and sort of supporting a bunch of other sort of kaupapa around this within the sector. My why, I think, my why isn't about reducing emissions. It's about increasing adaptability and adaptability of our businesses. I hate hearing the word reduce. It means less of. I think we live in a world where everything is plentiful, knowledge is plentiful, time is not so plentiful. So if we spend our time figuring out what we're going to reduce, it's hard to sort of build upon. So for me, it's just around, my why is around increasing the adaptability of our businesses. So those kids that I drive around from different sports most weeks and most weekends can continue doing, sort of setting a legacy up for themselves, as well as we've all had a chance to do so.
Charles, thank you. George, let's move on to you.
Yeah, kia ora, George Moss, a dairy farmer from Tokoroa. Look, getting to a low emissions place has been a bit of a journey for us. We started off, but like Aidan said yesterday, trying to be very efficient, very profitable farmers, and then the water issues came along, and then we started to benchmark ourselves against water, and we found actually what we were doing was actually minimising our impact on water. And then I did a greenhouse gas course at Massey University, and they actually found that even with the technologies we've got now, there's a number of things we can do on farm that will pull our absolute emissions down. So that started the beginning of a journey for us. And what we've actually found, and particularly when we started to engage with Dairy NZ and some of their initial work is, and they did the quadrants there around absolute emissions, we found that we're in the highest profit quadrant and lowest total emissions, the quadrant for that. So that was sort of very pleasing. So it's sort of moved to two things now. One, it's very good for our business, and it's actually building resilience in an enduring business, and we are thinking intergenerationally. But there was a saying that was said on TV, I think it was about 3 years ago, and I think it was by one of the islanders who was faced with their atoll being submerged. And he said, we will not get significant improvement around climate change and mitigation until enough rich white people hurt. And it's a terrible saying, but there's a certain amount of truth in that, because you actually look around the world and you look in New Zealand, which communities are going to be the hardest hit? It'll be the Nepals, it'll be the islands, it'll be Africa, it'll be Bangladesh, it'll be Pakistan. They have a round skin, I'm sorry to say. And so that's become a sort of bit of a driving force for me. I don't want to be one of those rich white men who did nothing.
George, thank you. Matt.
Hi, Matt Hocken from Grassmere Dairy. My wife runs the Lean Dairy Farm, so you may have come across her, and we're also doing some agri-tourism, but mainly it's a dairy business, which is the hat that I'll be talking from today. The family's been farming since 1890. We did some strategy work with some advisors and our own team to look at, okay, so what would a successful agri-business look like in 2090, so 200 years. We may not be around for it, but how can we set up the business so it could be successful then? So that looks at scale, diversification, adoption of technology, operating systems, capital, the environment, and our emissions. So that all comes in, and essentially, you know, we want to be the best farmers in the world, and so that's really helped us guide a long-term view of our why for it. And saying that, the last 18 months have been very focused on the business. We've bought a farm, we've launched 2 businesses, and getting the invitation to come down here today, to be honest, I'd been in my bubble. I was a bit cynical, and I think you can get like that. So coming down here, seeing, I think, any sector which is able to attract the smartest people and get the most focused on the problems that we have and the solutions will be successful. And I can really see and feel that here today. So thanks for getting me out of my bubble and bringing some new ideas to the table for me.
Great, Matt. Thank you. Julie.
Kia ora koutou, Julie Collins, DDG, Policy and Trade for Ministry of Primary Industries. My why, interesting one. I started working on climate change when I came back after living in the UK for 15 years in 2006. My first thing I had to do was set up a technical advisory group on should we bring agriculture into the emissions trading scheme. And look, so I've been on the centre or the periphery of this debate for the last 20 years. My why, after living overseas, New Zealand is the most fantastic place in the world, and I don't want to live anywhere else. Our farming systems are fantastic, our ecology is fantastic, and for me, I think tackling climate change and finding solutions is existential for everything I love and I want future generations to have.
Julie, thank you. Jessie?
Kia ora koutou, ko Jessie Chan tōku ingoa. I'm a director of AgriZero and also dairy farming. I'm an equity partner in a dairy farm in mid-Canterbury, having come through the share milking system and leased large-scale dairy farming there. If I put my farmer hat on, and as the owner of, as a shareholder in our largest dairy cooperative, my why is around I'm acutely aware that if we don't reduce our emissions, then we'll have less options about who buys our products. So, that's important in terms of a farming lens, and also why I joined the board of AgriZero.
Thanks, Jessie. Simon, let's finish with you.
Kia ora tātou, Simon Limmer. I wear a number of hats, so maybe some of the comments that I make today may be attributed to different organisations depending on how they land. I am in the wine industry, chief executive of Indivin, but I'm also a director of AgriZero with Jessie. I'm on the New Zealand Trade and Enterprise Board. Aotearoa Circle is also some of the work I do. I have just arrived. I haven't heard the rest of the conference, unfortunately. I've just came back with Minister Macleay from India on the FTA trip, but it probably epitomises my why as well. So I've spent most of my last 20 years working in the markets with Cespri, with Silver Fern Farms, and now with Indivin, taking the best products in the world to the world, telling the story of the best of New Zealand to the world. And it is an incredible privilege to be able to do that. But, we do very, very well in terms of our positioning. We sell trust to the world, and backing that up with integrity is really the challenge that we have. We have no natural advantages really in terms of our proximity, our size, our scale, our cost of land, our cost of labour, but the integrity we have, the quality of the products that we make, and now I think the opportunity to lead the way with our climate change policies is our point of difference. And it's possibly our biggest vulnerability if we don't get it right. So really, really clear this is the big opportunity that we have to take.
Great, Simon, thank you. So what we're going to do now is move into a series of 3 questions. I'm going to be asking the panellists 2 questions up front, then we're going to move to a poll, and then we're going to come back to a 3rd question. And if we're tracking well in terms of time, I'm always really optimistic at the start of these sessions that we'll be really good on time. It often doesn't pan out, but we'll see how we go. Please send us in your questions. I can see them here on the iPad, and we will bring those to the panellists if we've got some time in this session as well. So the first question is, what's working well that we should continue or build on? What's working well that we should continue or build on? And Tracy, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I'll just take a minute because I actually realised I forgot to say what my role was in all of this, having gone first. So I'm Tracy Brown, first and foremost a dairy farmer from Matamata. I'm also a governor and a chair for Māori Agribusiness in Northland. I'm a director for the Ag Emissions Centre and the chair of Dairy NZ, so I kind of wear a whole range of hats in all of this. But in terms of what's going well, I think on that artistic diagram out in the lobby there was a little piece around farmers are the force, and I think farmers are getting on and sort of dealing with this and figuring out how to do some of this, and hats off to farmers like Aidan and George and Matt that are really kind of driving that, because I think that's really helping. It's showing people that it's possible. Our milk processing companies have done us a real favour, like getting the data, playing us back the insights, so we now know where we sit on the bell curve in terms of emissions, whether we're good, bad or otherwise, and I think that's really helped dairies quite well advanced in that. And then the other piece is really around partnerships and collaboration. So you heard from Mark Neal about the emissions and profitability work, so that's sort of within the dairy sector with LIC and Fonterra. We've been working with individual milk companies and RPs to grow the capability and the understanding around farm systems, and a lot of people won't actually realise that Dairy NZ's been doing that work, so we've done a lot of work in that space. The dairy environment leaders and the climate change ambassadors, they've been really proactive in terms of pushing this stuff along. And then we've been doing some work with MPI and Julie's team, people there around the inventory. So that's sort of at the kind of the dairy kind of level. Then across the pastoral sector, we had the recent announcement with Simon around the dairy beef opportunity. So that'll have an impact on lowering emissions, and that's been really important. That's kind of really kind of set things up in terms of how we can partner going forward. And then really importantly, the global collaboration that's going on. And so we're working with the Irish, particularly around inventory and the pasture system, because if we don't, nobody else will. And then we have another project with the Horizons EU Fund, and that's with one of the farms in Taranaki, really kind of looking at how in a farm context we can reduce emissions. So there's lots going on at lots of different levels, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, great. Tracy, thank you. Simon, I'll come to you with the same question. What do you think's working well or that we can build on?
Oh, I think I'm probably going to echo a lot of what's been said. I think the fact that we're having these sorts of conversations is a good thing. Our superpower in New Zealand is that we all know each other. We can have these conversations quite openly. Our weakness is that we don't herd particularly well. So at the end of the day, we don't naturally bring these conversations to fruition. Sorry, I'm getting off topic quite quickly as to what's not going well. However, what's going well is that we're at a point where we understand the issue, we're joined up, we're pretty aligned in the thinking. We have measurements, as we've already talked about. I think there is technology coming through in the Agri-Zero example and the public-private construct that we've managed to bring out of that, I think, is something quite unique. And I think the leadership from some of the companies, but not all, is really fundamental. I mean, I don't want to talk about Silver Fern Farms given my past history there, but taking a punt, stepping in with some new innovative products, point of difference in the market, which is really demonstrating what's possible out of New Zealand, has been a first around the world, and we need more of that sort of bravery, that leadership, and the farmers who have jumped on board with those sort of initiatives as well. There are plenty of forward-facing people. We need to harness them, we need to encourage them, we need to push our weight in behind them.
Thanks, Simon. Got to come to Charles and then to Julie on this one. So the question is, what is working well that we should continue or build on? Charles.
Working well. Genetics, that's a big part. We've got a bunch of blocks that I sort of sit on and that we work with within my day job, where we're sort of integrating cool sheep genetics. There's a bunch of cool stuff there where we can get all the stuff that we really want around, growth rates, IMF, all that sort of stuff, but have that cool sheep stuff baked in, so we're getting everything we need. They're doing a heap of work around there, having shorter tails, so we don't have to dock, and all these extra things that we can do. Like, this is all doable stuff that I can do tomorrow. It just takes a while to get them pregnant and have the lamb, but it doesn't really matter. We just get started. So that's probably one of the big things for me. And I think the focus that I feel we're doing, and it feels a bit different from last year to this year, is the people, profit, and planet. Like, we can't cut off our arms and think we're going to save ourselves. Like, we've got to have that front of mind, but we can't. You can't give up on the challenge, and I feel we're still pushing hard, and everyone's pushing hard. If the one thing I felt today, we didn't talk about legislation or the Zero Carbon Act here in the last 2 days. We talked about what we're doing and how we can get there. So that's good.
Charles, thank you. And Julie, same question. What's working well that we should continue or build on? Interested, just given your earlier comment at the start too, in terms of your perspectives over time, and has that changed?
So it probably goes back to something I said when I presented yesterday, is the ecosystem in New Zealand. And it's something when I talk to my colleagues in Australia or the EU or Japan, they're absolutely envious of us around the ecosystem we have. And by that I mean we're funding the research, we've got a joint venture partnership that's looking at commercialisation. We've tidied up our regulatory system to get the balance right of supporting companies coming through but still making sure our products we export are going to be safe and suitable. We've had real influence internationally at Codex, OECD, FAO, and getting consensus around monitoring, reporting and verification, and sharing guidelines around how do you bring mitigation technology through so they don't become non-trade barriers. So we're hitting it at all stages of the ecosystem, and we now have a real suite of technologies that cover our range of farming systems and everything from genetics and feeds through to vaccines coming through. So it feels like we've never been better positioned. And one of the arguments going right back into 2008 around why you shouldn't do anything on agriculture was, one, most people didn't believe climate change was real and we needed to do anything. Two, our overseas partners, our overseas countries weren't doing anything about it, so it would just lead to leakage. And three, there was nothing farmers could do about it other than destocking. And the angst that used to create when you go out and talk to farmers. If you force a price on us, we're out of business. What's going to happen to my farm? Can I pass my farm on to my kids? And it feels like for the first time, we have some real incredible options and answers for farmers. And that's been a long time coming.
Yeah, absolutely. George, I'm going to come to you for the last one on this one. It's a nice segue. You're talking about options for farmers, Julie. George, as a farmer, what do you think's working well that we need to continue and build on?
Obviously, what's working well from a farmer's perspective, there's been any amount of science that's going on and happening. There's also some science that's actually sitting in our own institutions that say that we can actually do this. So that is actually a good thing. The dialogue has actually shifted over the years from where it was seen that the only option was to actually drop a stocking rate and that farmers would go broke, to now that this is actually doable. And it was unfortunate that dialogue actually happened. So the dialogue has shifted, the sentiment within the farming base has shifted. When I did my first speech in Taituha, I think it must have been 4 or 5 years ago, I was abused to my face about climate change. It wasn't real. I was controlled by the government, you name it. I was absolutely to my face. And even when did the climate change ambassador stuff early on, some of that stuff was pretty full on and pretty in your face. I tested the waters the other day at a Fonterra meeting around pricing of emissions and what was happening, and that this is real. And despite the flip-flop in the government, that we still needed to get on with it. And I had feedback that was, thank you for raising the hard questions, George, and so it was a totally different sentiment. So what I see is the farmer base has shifted, and the farmer base now is looking for leadership, and I think that's a real good thing.
Great, thanks, George. All right, we're going to flip the coin, everyone. I'm going to start with Jessie and then go to Matt on this next question and then a couple of others. So the question is, what is one hard truth or challenge that we need to face right now as a sector? Sorry to start with you on this one, Jessie, but do you want to have a crack at that one?
Oh, no, that's right. If I could start with what's working well, because I think it leads into that, is one thing that's working really well, and we saw it in the data this afternoon, is farmers tweaking farm systems to reduce emissions. And I think one thing we're not very good at is acknowledging what's already been done. We talk like we're starting from zero sometimes, but we're not. There's actually a lot of work that's gone in. When I think back 15 years ago, when as a farmer in Canterbury, I was on 400 hectares fully irrigated, and we were incorporating plantain and chicory into our sward, and a lot of those actions over the last couple of decades may have been born out of productivity or impact on waterway kind of origination, but actually they have some reduction in emissions kind of outcomes as well. And they spoke to condensed tannins this morning as well. So there's a lot of farm systems tweaks that are going on, a lot of activity, as George has alluded to. What I guess we're trying to do now is put the hockey stick into the curve, into the graph, to go, actually, how can we accelerate it with some tools and technology that get us to where we need to be by 2030. So that's, I think, what we should continue to make those incremental changes, but, with the things that the type of technologies that AgriZero are investing in, for example, to help hockey stick that trajectory. In terms of our hard truths, one of the things that's been challenging has been we need some really clear policy settings to give farmers the confidence to invest and to actually, be part of that hockey stick. And, you heard from Cameron yesterday about if we continue with the jandal politics, it's really hard to get to that point. I guess one thing that we could consider as, well, there's leadership from government, but there's also leadership from within industry in terms of how do we, to Julie's point around the ecosystem, how do we work together to make sure that there is leadership around where do we want to be as an industry, how do we get there in terms of linking up science, our internal policy settings, our commercial, processor imperatives, across, and with the farmer as the centre of the actions that are being undertaken to achieve all of that. So leadership within our own sector is going to be really important, because I don't think we can rely solely on government to help us with those policy settings, but that leadership's got to be clear and consistent across the whole ecosystem for a farmer.
Thanks, Jessie. Matt, come to you on this one.
One of the truths, which we heard two sides of this in the last couple of days. One where we were the best in the world at emissions and climate change. And I sort of think of that with some of the speakers, particularly the inspirational speakers we've had, or if you take it to the sports field. If Lisa Carrington's the best, can you imagine her saying, "I'm the best, I don't need to do any more"? Can you imagine Peter Burling? I went to one of his speeches. He said, if we take our mind from getting better every day, pretty soon we are 10 boat lengths back. Sir Edmund Hillary, he wasn't even put forward to be the first up the mountain or the first across Antarctica, but he took his opportunity and kept proving he was the best. I just think we've got this great position. If I take the example of what we do on our farm, which is apply lean principles, it came out of Toyota. They build quality into their cars, and it became a comparative advantage for them. This would be a comparative advantage for us to build this into our system and keep improving it. If we take the other side and say we're not the best, which I think there was some evidence across different parts of what we're doing, well then look, we've got those areas to focus on. And probably the biggest thing, if we bring it back down inside the farm gate, where I think most of the big change can happen, it's multifactorial, but getting good data sets, getting people focused on where they are and where we need them to be across Aidan Bicken's 11 things that he gave us, which I think was a great start, very practical, very simple for farmers to get hold of. But across those things, if we can really focus down on that, then we know where we need to put the energy, where we need to put the support, and perhaps a little bit of hand holding for some, then we can get to where we need to be.
Matt, thank you. Julie, what's your perspectives on this one? So the question again, everyone, is what's one hard truth or challenge we need to face right now as a sector?
Erosion of our competitive advantage. At a time emissions efficiency is going from a nice to have to a must to have. We'll still be able to sell our products, but we won't be able to get the premium market prices and sell into those very premium markets that we currently do. We'll be selling to Africa and in the other countries. We won't be selling to the people that afford to pay. And just as a little fact, we monitor as part of SOAPI prices. We saw global dairy prices fall after the Iran conflict kicked up. New Zealand's prices held up while other countries' prices fell. So let you be under no illusion, we are not a low-cost producer. We are a producer of trusted, a predictable premium product. Let's not pick it up.
Well, there's a quotable quote, everyone. Thanks, Julie. I'm going to go to George and to Tracy on this one. So again, question, what's one hard truth or challenge we need to face right now as a sector?
Look, one of the hard challenges in the space right now, and I'll speak from a dairy perspective because that's the industry I know. Probably about 6 years ago, I think we were leading in this space. We had the Step Change project. We had some good science sitting in behind us. We had climate change ambassadors. And our own science in the dairy industry shows that we can do a 15% reduction in emissions and a 23% lift in profit. So that's a good thing. And we're working on a three-legged stool. We have to have profit, we have to get absolute emissions down, and we have to get our intensity down. So we have some science already in the organisation to do that. Our official position in Wakanoa that we can do 10% without any loss of profit. But politics started to get into the way of progress. That is the hard truth. We can actually fix that now, and I think that the coup to actually fix that is for us as dairy farmers, us as climate change ambassadors, and Dairy NZ is to pick up that leadership mantle and put together a strategy of how we're actually going to deliver change at pace, to Jessie's point, on farm. And it's going to take resourcing, it's going to take collaboration. And I look in the room, we've got Agri-Zero with resourcing, we've got on-farm with resourcing, we've got Dairy NZ with massive resources, we've got Fonterra already working in this space. As farmers, not necessarily as our industry leaders, we need to pull that together, we need to lead that. But it also goes back to you, audience. What you need to do in 12 months' time is stand here and say, dairy industry, what is your strategy? What have you done? What is your progress? And hold us to account. Because we are the premier livestock industry at the end of the day. So, the challenge I put to you, Tracy, and absolutely supportive of you, seeing what you've done with water, we need to do the same with gases. We need to grab it. We need to pull the whole team together because we're in silos at the moment. Take the knowledge we already have, make it happen, start funding ourselves, don't wait on governments. Emissions pricing is coming, end of story, I tell you now. It's whether we do it to ourselves or it's done to us. So let's use that as a resource and let's make the change happen. So that's the opportunity and that's the hard truth.
George, thank you. Tracy, your perspectives on this one.
Yeah, I think the science around all of this stuff is hard and complex, and it's harder than everybody thought. And if anyone spent any time hanging out with Harry, the frustration around this, it's real. So it is tricky. The efficiency piece will get us so far, and it'll get us a long way, as George has said, but we still will need those mitigations to do the final reduction. So I think we need to start, and we need to be confident that the investment that's being made will provide us with mitigations in the future. It's not an excuse not to start because we don't have, just because there's not a lot available right now. The burden can't sit with one organisation alone, and this is that kind of piece around collaboration. And, we need the companies to sort of interpret the market signals, to reward farmers. We need the industry bodies to do the research. We need the farmers to get on board. We need the government to have the right policy setting. So it's a big team ag approach around this. And then I guess at some stage we're actually going to have to think about adaptation as well. And Dairy NZ's been doing quite a bit of thinking around this, particularly in terms of heat stress and pasture resilience. So we kind of need to do both. We need a mitigation and adaptation because we don't want to leave our run too late on adaptation either.
Tracy, thank you. You talked about collaboration. George, you mentioned silos. Simon, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I think you talked about one of the opportunities in New Zealand is because we're small, we know each other, but we don't work together that well. Do you just want to comment on your reflections on that theme about, the taking away the silos, working together better, more effectively?
Yeah, I'll do my best. I mean, look, we do know each other well, and there are so many conversations that we're having multiple times over, and yet we're struggling to sort of reach the tipping point where the conversations are turning into actions. We are by nature tribal. We tend to retreat back into our various groups, or the companies we're affiliated to, or the whatever it may be, the catchment groups we're involved in, and there is a competitive sort of mindset that sometimes sets in. So I think we've really got to get our heads beyond that. I think the concept of the ecosystem is such a good one. I wrote down the same language, and I think it's been used a number of times. What that implies is that we are all interdependent. And when we get it right, it is phenomenal in terms of the power it can bring. And I think, putting the landowner at the centre of our ecosystem and giving them agency, rather than sort of being the buffer or the shock absorber at the bottom of our system. What that means is we have to be really clear about giving them the market signals and giving them the incentives and the long-term thinking required here, rather than the short-term that we're exposed to. We have to ensure that the productivity gains that they're looking for are believable. They will, in my opinion, do the right thing, because typically that's what the more progressive farmers are doing. But what we can't do is rely on policy. So we come back to the same arguments. From a market perspective, I can tell you it's only heading in one direction, and that's a direction which is supporting the progress that we're going to make. The free trade agreements that we're looking at all have sustainability clauses built into them. And if you didn't think that India is going to be relevant, look at where China has come from in such a short space of time with their free trade agreement, probably leading the way, probably politically astute in terms of what they're doing. But the world is changing very, very quickly. The consumers at the end of the day are the ones who are demanding the sort of progress, knowing what the impact is of the products they're making. So for us, my job, the leadership we need to show from the market end, is to get those signals really clearly back to the farmer. It won't necessarily come back as a direct payment. At Zespri, we used to have a saying, do as I pay, not as I say, because ultimately that was the way that farmers were going to respond to the messaging. Here it's a little bit more of a leap of faith, but the money has to flow back through in some shape or form.
Great, Simon, thank you. We are actually running a little bit ahead of time, so I'm going to get us to go to the poll now. So this is an opportunity for you to give us some of your thoughts and start thinking about what might be some priorities for action from your perspective. So the question that the poll is going to ask is, where should we prioritise effort, investment and focus to unlock New Zealand's low emissions advantage? And the poll asks you to select 3 from a list. So we're going to give you a little bit of space to do that now. And I'll keep an eye on what's coming through, and then we'll move back into our third question here with the panel and some questions from the floor if we have time to do so at the end. So have a crack at that poll. So just while a few more are completing that, just for our panellists, the categories. So the question again was, where should we prioritise action to unlock New Zealand's low emission advantage? And the categories were research and evidence, tools and technologies, scaling proven solutions, policy and incentives, investment and infrastructure, farmer adoption, market development, New Zealand positioning, and then there was an other category as well where people could put a free text response in. So it looks as though our responses have slowed down. We've got 117 in so far. The top category was farmer adoption, so 68 of our 117 answers, so just over 50%, I think. I shouldn't actually give percentages because I can't really count. So farmer adoption was number 1. Number 2, very close behind, at 64 responses, was policy and incentives, settings that enable and reward action. And number 3 was research and evidence, understanding emissions, measurement and data. If you haven't completed that, would encourage you to do so while we continue through the remainder of our panel discussion. So everyone, we're going to come now to our third question of our panel session. So this is, where do we need to put more effort or energy? And importantly, who needs to do it? Where do we need to put more effort or energy, and who needs to do it? Jessie, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I think I'd come back to my previous point around the ecosystem and coordinating that and ensuring there's leadership and consistent approach. And I think, having been involved in AgriZero since its inception, it's been really encouraging to see that we're able to take the lead in some spaces and then work alongside partners in other spaces. And I think if we do more of that across the ecosystem, whilst, to Simon's point, making sure that the farmer is central to that thinking, then I think that's where we make progress, because that, to me, that's also the pivot point for the adoption piece, because there has to be a reason there for farmers to do it.
Thanks, Jessie. Who will I go to next? Matt, should we go to you?
Yeah, well, the survey said adoption was the key focus, and I'd agree with that, farmer adoption. We've adopted different technologies into our farming system, I think reasonably successfully. But what we've really looked at, broken it down, is where are we going to capture the value, or where are our key, again, limiting factors that we're looking at. And so, wearable technology, halter virtual fencing was one. We want to harvest more grass, we want better animal health outcomes, lower lameness, lower mastitis. We want to reduce our fuel usage, we want to reduce our repairs and maintenance on farm vehicles. We want to make sure that our team are using better use of their time rather than sitting on a motorbike behind cows. So you go through all those and you work out what you think you can do out of it. It's the same if we're buying technology or if we're buying a tractor. We're not in the business of tractors. We want a tractor to do something for us or create some value or do whatever. And I think it's the same for these technologies or these opportunities that are coming through. What is in our system and how is it going to fit in there? And if our goal for our farm is a particular thing, how does it fit with that goal? And I think there's a big capability build in farmers that we need to get to look at their system, look at where those points are and how they're going to target them and what is the target and where they get to with it. So that's, we get people coming to ask us how we've adopted technology, and we sort of say, this is what we did. And they say, well, look, we gave it to the manager and said, look, here you go. So, there is quite, I think that's an adoption. How in big corporates, you understand how to adopt technology. You've got a team working out. For a farmer with all these different things, they're probably not thinking it in such a structured way, and particularly where they can see the value from it.
Thanks,
in
Matt.
line with their business.
Yeah. Charles, come to you on this one. So again, the question is, where do we need to put more effort or energy and who needs to do it?
Yeah, cool. The farmer adoption stuff, I think it's a no-brainer. We also need more farm system knowledge in the research sectors. DNZ do a really good job of this with their farm systems team, but the BSI and others who we're doing work with, farm systems is the thing. It's the thing that you got to put everything into. So if you get people who can understand that system, that's really good. And also just remember what a farmer is, because there's different views. Like for us in Whenua Māori, I'm not a farmer, I'm a governor. And my role is 2-hour meeting once a month, and I've got to try and put everything you want us to go and do and plan to do through a 2-hour meeting, as well as discuss why Auntie wants a box of meat. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you got to deal with, and to Cameron's point around what's front of mind and what the thing I need to fix at that 2-hour meeting is the bit it'll generally be my whānau who are asking me these weirdo questions. But so from a farm adoption piece, I think we can do more. I want good to see the farmer research advisory group from Benson and Andrew and Ethel. We've got our crew from the centre. I've seen Craig and Emma, our guys from Taituha, who are here, having really calling on us, those groups to actually give you some really good solid advice, but also take the things to our farms and test it, and then we can be, your guinea pigs and help us de-risk that. A little bit. I shouldn't actually talk about halter too bad, but I get annoyed with the companies like Halter who have gone and put them on our farm. We've paid for it, and then they've gone and learnt all this stuff, and now they're selling it to the world. And I had to pay for the journey, and I actually gave more than what I possibly could have got back, because I don't get to go and sell a couple of $100 million. So, just think about us as a farmer in that conversation. The other do more bit is narratives. At home on my marae, I'm a underwater ceramic technician or a dishwasher. Now, if you take that into account and sort of say the narrative is that title sounds amazing and it gives me the purpose to want to do what I want to do, and I feel like I'm part of this whole big journey. Just remember that narrative for the farmer and the people and the shepherds on there. How do you bring them in on that journey as well? Because we can sit in this room and do all the stuff and talk about it, and I got a little bit of scuff on my shoes, but I mean, like shiny shoes, you really, how are you going to make that change? You've got to walk this journey with these people, with these communities, and I think that's the narrative. If we can bring the farmer into, not the farmer, they're a farm business owner. They own and operate $1 million businesses off bugger all sleep and a bunch of other things that are coming at them. So we've just got to take away all those, de-risk them and take away the juggle. So take some balls off them that they're currently juggling, so that they can actually look into their business a bit better.
Charles, thank you. It's such a great point about how many things come at farmers and recognising that, you know, topic X might be the most important to us, but it's only one of the things that they need to be dealing with. Tracy, we'll come to you.
Thanks, Scott. And there was a number of those things Charles mentioned that really resonate strongly with me as well. But I guess we need to be able to scale solutions, not just develop them. They need to actually be scalable. And just a shout out really to those groups that Charles mentioned with the ag emissions, my ag emissions hat on. We have the end user advisory group, we have the science advisory group, and we have Taituha, and we've really kind of front-footed their input into the process and the design now, which I think is working really well. Thinking of that end user, at the front footing, the planning around the science. The piece around the farm systems and better quantifying and understanding the levers, because that's the bit that we can do work on right now. I think there's a lot more we could be doing on that. More carrots and less sticks, that's sort of the clear incentives and the signals. You know, farmers respond really well to being rewarded. So just thinking about through markets and policy and what have you, how that can actually happen. And then the final bit is around just that trust-based engagement with farmers and having the real conversations. And George alluded to the fact that we've done this before with water. It took at least 15 years, if not closer to 20. I think we can do emissions reduction in a much less time with that than that, knowing what we know from what we went through with water. But from someone that kind of went through that, and there'll be many of you in the room, we don't want to lose our social licence again. So this is an opportunity, I guess, to lean in and take what we've learned and really kind of push forward on this, but also be realistic with farmers and have those honest conversations. Some of the stuff is going to take a bit longer than we thought. It is more complex than we thought, but there are some things that we can do in the interim. Just got to get on with it.
Tracy, thank you. I'll come to Julie and then to George, and then we'll finish with Simon. We've got an opportunity in terms of time to ask everyone this question.
This is where I give away, we got heads up on these questions before coming in. And I wrote down farmers' hearts and minds before I listened to the conversation, because farmers are at the centre of this. And this, we will either be successful or spectacularly unsuccessful on that basis, unless we win farmers' hearts and minds and support them on this journey. Our climate change ambitions around reducing greenhouse gases will be going nowhere.
Great, Julie. Thank you. George, come to you.
Yeah, look, it is about hearts and minds, and it is about walking with farmers on the journey, and they do need to be absolutely central. We took a lot of lessons from water, and we risk losing our social licence to operate. That same risk actually exists now, and I think while it's challenging, we can actually do it faster if we resource it, and it's about pooling those resources. And I think we can do a lot of little things just in our dialogue that we have within the industry and that. If we put a greenhouse lens across all our sort of science, all the things we do and all the communications, it's not about telling people what to do, it's about subtly getting them to understand that this is really important. And when we report on science, for instance, we can say, well, if you adopt this thing, it will actually improve your greenhouse gases, or it might make them worse. So at least they got an informed position around that. But I think I really do believe and come back that the opportunity right now, and I think the pressure is on our sector and dairy in particular, to take the lead in this space, and rather than look to government for support or subsidies, let's do it ourselves. We can actually do this within the sector, whether we get to the targets or the goals that we want, but let's really get the trajectory and that hockey stick going up. But it's somebody just grab this and say, I am going to lead.
Great, George, thank you. Simon, let's finish with you on this one.
Look, the farmer at the centre of the conversation has been pretty predominant, but there is a consumer who also needs to be very, very closely linked to that conversation. Just about everyone else is irrelevant, to be honest. The producer and the consumer are the two who need to be closely connected. And I think our opportunity here is to recognise that the consumer and their expectation hasn't gone away. The politics of the moment do not change that expectation from our customers around the world and the consumers as to what they want from us, and our opportunity to continue to premiumise what we do and lead the way. So I think our job here is to really make sure that we are tapped into that sentiment clearly. We know who we are serving. We know who is paying us for all of the work that we're doing here, and that ultimately we are making the connection between the producer and the consumer as tight and as short as we possibly can, not only figuratively, but in the mechanisms in terms of the relationships that they have and the mechanisms we use to pay. So fundamentally, I believe that the market will reward us for the work that we're doing. The policy is going to be short-term by nature, but the market will be long-term. So I think we have been a little bit deficient in terms of how loudly we're making those voices heard at the moment, and there is a point of difference across a number of the different processors and marketers that probably like that dulling of the message to come through, and I think we shouldn't stand for that. We need to know what our markets want from us, because that's telling us where we need to head, and it's in the direction that we're talking about today.
Great, thanks Simon, great point to finish up on. Just if you do have some questions, we do have a little bit of time, probably 5 minutes or so, if there are some questions that you want to pose. I just thought before I see if there are any questions that have come through, I'd go back to the answers. So we had 131 responses to our poll questions. The top responses have stayed effectively the same, and in fact the gaps opened up between number 1 and number 2 a little bit. So number 1 was farmer adoption, capability, advice and on-farm support. Number 2 again was policy and incentive settings that enable and reward action, and number 3 was research and evidence, understanding emissions and measurement data. So we'll just see if there are any questions. Just going to see if there are any more coming through. We've got one here, and I'll just take whoever might like to respond to this. So it says, do the panellists feel a more ambitious reception and promotion of mitigation or adaptation approaches needs to be taken, moving beyond a focus on development and uptake of new technological options? Has anyone got thoughts on that? And a more ambitious reception and promotion of mitigation and adaptation. Do we think that's needed?
Ooh, that's not exactly sure what they're asking.
Yeah, I guess it's about beyond this room, getting out there and doing a number of the things more widely that you've been talking about here today, building knowledge and understanding, etc. So I guess it's almost the promotional piece in a sense.
I will have a crack at that, and that's where I see if we reinvigorate the climate change ambassadors, because that was part of our role, was to actually prepare people for change and prepare people for a changing world, and what the pressures are that's coming on. And that was part about explaining the consumer expectations. It's also about the licence to operate and all those sorts of things. So it was taking it wider to a group of farmers that don't probably normally engage, certainly with the likes of this organisation and more formal structures. So there's a critical role there.
Thanks, George. Tracy?
The other piece is around some case study farms, which kind of builds on a little bit on the work that Mark Neal shared before, and there's been some farmers involved with that, so that there's more examples in regions that farmers can relate to and go along and sort of understand what the levers are more. So I think some work in that space, or more work in that space, would be good.
I remember years ago, sort of to this conversation, I did some work with a rural sociologist, and she said to me one day, always realise there are rational reasons for not doing something on farm, you've just got to work out what they are, and that's always stuck with me. And so I think to some of the points that have been made here today, try to understand what they are and addressing those. Matt, did you have something you wanted to add to this one?
Just one to add, probably a little bit, my opening statement about being in my bubble back there, like I think I'm probably a microcosm of it. And you come along to an event like this or another event where there's a level of trust and there's expertise. That's when you really wake up and move on things. And there's so much online there. There's so much rubbish online. There's a tsunami of it there. Both sides of the argument. Farmers will really pick up things when you're talking with somebody who's trusted, who's of a level that you can really, really take up that information. So it's kind of fostering those opportunities to do that. And the other thing I'd say is there's still a lot of crocodiles out there. We learnt that there was one farm that had 30% of their calves were being eaten by crocodiles. So, there's still 30% empty rates out there. There's still things like that, So there's so much that our farmers could do, which is within the broad scope, without getting too fussed about anything else, that is going to make a big difference to their on-farm emissions. So, and it's a big challenge, isn't it? Because DRNZ and others have been doing this for a while. But there's a number of things that we can really get on in the farmers' normal course of events, which is going to make a difference. But getting trusted people out there, some of the forums you've said, I think that's where, face to face, that's the real value.
I'll take another response if there is one before I close. Jessie?
Oh no, I'd agree tautoko what's already been said. I think the other thing is, like I spent 20 years in the Federated Farmers Fold, and people love them or hate them or ambivalent, but those organisations are also really important in terms of connecting with not only those that like to drink the same Kool-Aid, but also those that oppose you, because I think it's important to continue those conversations in a respectful and a way that includes everybody in the thinking, rather than, look, you don't agree with me, so we're not going to talk anymore. So I think that's really important.
Simon, did you have a quick comment you wanted to make on this?
Not particularly, but... Particularly. Do you want me to say something?
Well, you can if you'd like to.
No, look, last comment from me. It feels to me as though there are so many elements now which are aligned, and there's a tipping point coming. We can't wait on one specific thing to push us over the edge, be it policy or something else. There's a whole lot of things which are moving in the right direction. I think just getting our weight behind all of those different initiatives, that tipping point will become more apparent and closer to us as we keep moving forward.
Great, Simon. Great point to finish up on. So look, the session here this afternoon and the visual illustration that's been going on outside, and we saw Eloise talk to a number of the points just prior to starting this final panel discussion, I think it really helped to bring lots of the things that have been talked about over the last couple of days together. But it's sort of where the real work begins, and so the mission's clear. We need to turn low emissions into high value. We need to strengthen resilience. We need to lead the world here from New Zealand. Realising the mission will require a coordinated and creative effort, and we've heard a number of points here about the need for that collective push. Can't rely on policy change alone, and progress depends on all of us measuring and managing emissions to unlock that advantage and build a stronger and more resilient sector. So if I could get you to thank our panellists today, to Tracy, Charles, George, Matt, Julie, Jessie and Simon. And so it's time for the conference close. It's a great pleasure to hand over to David Hughes. David is the chair of the Ag Emissions Centre Governance Group, and he's going to give the final wrap-up and the close for the conference. Thanks very much.
So, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Yes, as Scotty said, it's my job just to wrap up for us today, to think back over the last couple of days, and what a great couple of days it's been. It's been the biggest event of this type that we've ever run, and what a great diversity of people we've had in the room. I hope you've had the opportunity to rub shoulders with people that you haven't talked to before, have an opportunity to introduce yourself and learn a little bit about how they're involved with this effort. Thinking back over the last couple of days, yesterday in the first session, it was confronting and challenging. We heard that we can expect a clash between short-term challenges like inflation and food scarcity and the long-term challenge like ag emission reductions. So fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy ride for the next couple of years. In the second and fourth sessions, we heard that China, California and Australia have set ambitious goals, made public commitments and are working on technologies to achieve their commitments. If these countries succeed in transitioning to low-emission agriculture, where will that leave New Zealand? Perhaps the answer was summed up by the speaker from China who said, after laying out what they were doing to transition, China's direction will increasingly shape the expectations for trading partners. In session 3, we heard from major corporates that questions behind every procurement decision that is currently being made is this product future fit? And that New Zealand is uniquely positioned to lead the next wave of growth, which will go to suppliers with low emissions and resilience. Alexander Hillary told us that Ed didn't wait for permission or better technology. He led the way with simple solutions and practical common sense. Our dinner speaker reminded us that change is really hard, especially finding that first customer. He also told us that after he got that first hospital on board, which was frustratingly hard to do, each subsequent hospital became easier. This morning we heard about the Global Methane Hub and the work in Ireland to reduce emissions. We heard that we're not alone in our efforts to drive down emissions, but rather part of a highly connected global effort. Then in the next session, Brendan told us that rather than focusing on technology and the next shiny thing, we should be thinking about behaviours and structures required to take up technology. And he pointed out that research suggests that 12% of farmers were trailblazers, where a more typical number of early adopters in other contexts was just 5%. And he showed us that we have a healthy ecosystem of technology companies, that we are well past the shiny new thing phase and set for success. Naomi and Wayne gave us an overview of the work underway in New Zealand, including a chart that Wayne flashed up showing a forecast of future timings for technology availability. So tools are coming, and that was followed by a series of really interesting technology updates, which varied from fundamental work right through to things that are in the field right now, already driving down emissions. Mark Neal showed us that we can achieve low emissions and high profitability, and that there are great insights available for farmers to achieve both. And in the last session, the panel shared their why and challenged us to ask, why do I care about emissions, and what could my role be in unlocking the emissions and creating a low emission advantage? I've thoroughly enjoyed the last couple of days, and I hope you have too, so I think a few thanks are in order. Firstly, thanks to Naomi and the Ag Emissions Centre team that have driven the planning and delivery of this conference, particularly Lorette, Christina and Kelsey. If they're in the room, could perhaps they stand up for us? Are you hiding there somewhere? Yeah, round of applause. A huge amount of effort and a lot of hours have gone into the planning of this event, so thanks very much for everything you've done to make the event a success. Also to our conference partners, to MPI, AgriZero, and particular call out to Ben Morrow from MPI and Ashley from AgriZero. To the sponsors and exhibitors, particularly Christian from CELOC for sponsoring the coffee. You've been a lifesaver, thank you for that. To the taking team for helping ensure everything is run smoothly, both in the room and online. To our MCs and facilitators, Eloise, who's already had to leave unfortunately, for guiding us through the last 2 days, for Carla and Scott for chairing our farmer and final panel sessions, and for Mark Piper for MCing the dinner last night. To Ji Lee for his amazing visual summaries, and to our speakers for their engaging and thought-provoking sessions, such a breadth and depth of information on agriculture and climate change over the last 2 days. And finally, through to you, the audience. You really don't have a conference if people don't turn up. So thank you for showing up, thank you for being engaged, thank you for all of your questions. And speaking of those questions, we haven't been able to answer all of your questions during the sessions, but rest assured we'll be looking at those quite carefully as we plan over the next year and as we go about our work. And one last plug, can you please go on the survey? There'll be a survey asking you what you want for this conference next year. Really valuable for us, making this event better every year if you fill out that survey and give us a bit of guidance. So we hope that everyone leaves here thinking about what they can do as individuals and as collectives to unlock our low emission advantage. We wish you a safe journey home, and now I'd like to ask Chris to come and step up and Karakia for us to finish the conference. Chris, over to you.
E te ti e te tā, kei tēnā moka, kei tēnā whaitua, kei tēnā kōpiko tanga o te motu tēnā koutou katoa. E ki ana te kōrero, he pukinga wai, he huihuinga tangata, he pukinga whakaaro. So we say that where there's a body of water, there's a body of people. And wherever there's a body of people, there's a body of higher thought. So it's my privilege to end our wānanga, our conference with a karakia. But first I'd like to acknowledge Ali Haupapa of the tangata whenua of Tiatiawa, who opened the doors for us, who welcomed us, but also more importantly, ka tuku ia I ngā kupu ki te wāhi ngaro, ki te ao wairua, and she started off with a karakia. So my function is to close us with a karakia, and the function of my karakia is to draw down on all the energy, the mauri of the kōrero over the last couple of days, the contribution of people, to fix that energy in, that mauri, to strengthen our resolve in what we have to do, because we'll be climbing our own maunga, and that is more than just hinengaro intelligence. It takes perseverance and determination. So here we go. Tūramara-marangi puahoaho e hu kauwhanga nui whiti hui e. Whikeia te waharo ki whaia I o puhi ki te ake. Moitua ngea te hihiri, oi he ai o, he orua, he taurikura ki tōmina. Hui te ora, hui te marama, tihei, mauri ora. Kia ora everybody.